Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. What an amazing Women's World Cup soccer match. Ran a little bit later than normal, so we're going to have a short edition of Frankly Speaking this morning. But please feel free to contact us about any of the topics we'll discuss, and I thank you for moving your schedule all week so that you can catch the live edition of Frankly Speaking after Women's World Cup. Tomorrow we will be back at our regular time of 7 a.m. and I've got to tell you, we've got two special guests. The first guest, you would have caught this if you watched Big Fox News at 10. I kind of broke this story there. But on tomorrow's program, we're going to have Georgia Verdier. She's the president of the local chapter of the NAACP, and she's also the newest inductee to the Steuben County Hall of Fame. So we'll be talking with her tomorrow. And then after that, we'll be talking with Richard Sturban from the Oak Ridge Boys. The Oak Ridge Boys are playing at Point of the Bluff Vineyards in Hammondsport. I don't have to go through their whole history, I don't think. You know, of course, the song Elvira. They've sold over 41 million records. Well, Richard Sturban has been playing with them for 50 years. But before that, he was a backup singer to the king of rock and roll, Elvis. So we're going to ask him what it's like to give up a job with Elvis to join a new band, which in the long run proved to be a successful decision on his part. And he does have a book out called From Elvis to Elvira, but we're going to talk about the show that is this Saturday at Point of the Bluff Vineyard. So again, Richard Sturban from the Oak Ridge Boys. Really looking forward to that. When we come back, we have to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to cover all the topics of the day in a very short period of time. So please stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Hey, it was one of those bonus commercials where you get to see behind the scenes here on Frankly Speaking. What do you think of that? That doesn't happen every day. Or just a little technical glitch. We're getting to the bottom of it, and that's why you got to see me make a phone call live on the air. But you couldn't hear it. Thank heavens. So we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. I wanted to mention a local issue before we dive into the national scene. Voters in Steuben County will be asked to test potentially new voting machines. That is coming up next Wednesday from noon to 2 at the County Annex, 20 East Morris Street. They just want people to feel secure in the new voting machines. So if you'd like to be a part of that, you can attend and test out the new machines and help out the good folks at the Steuben County Board of Elections. Okay. Trump is going to appear today in federal court after being charged with the crimes related to January 6th. It's going to be interesting. The media's coverage has already been fascinating on it, as you are more than aware, I'm sure, at this point. We're going to take a quick look, and again, I'm going to have to take a break soon, and I apologize. We just got a truncated version of Frankly Speaking this morning because that was such an exciting match with women's soccer in the World Cup that it ran long. So I think how the game was going, I think we're actually lucky to have as much time on the air as we do. So he is, this is a piece from, and I don't have it to show you on the screen, but CNN, and this is what I mean by the media's coverage. CNN, Stephen Collinson, has a piece this morning that says, Trump set to return to Washington for monumental court date, but a national catharsis is unlikely. So Stephen Collinson looks at this, the indictment of a former president. He looks at this as something that should, I guess, heal the nation. Or he lives in such a bubble that he's surprised that everybody isn't feeling this catharsis, isn't feeling this sigh of relief over the former president being indicted. Whatever unfolds in an eventual trial, a moment of catharsis. I was going to make a comment that maybe got the word of the day calendar because he brings it up quite a few times, but catharsis, good word. A moment of catharsis over an episode that has deepened a poisonous national political estrangement is unlikely. Was anybody speculating that that was going to happen? That this trial was going to heal the nation? I think, isn't that been the argument from the beginning, that this is, and I mentioned it a lot yesterday, that it's hurting that political divide. It's only dividing us more. To begin with, the case and two other Trump criminal court proceedings are unfolding in the middle of a presidential campaign in which Trump blasts any attempt to call him to account as a tantamount to election interference. That means another campaign for the White House is sure to be tainted in the eyes of his millions of followers. Trump is also escalating his pressure on the political and judicial institutions that form the foundation of America's democratic society, drawing from the same well of extremism and demagoguery he tapped in 2021. Isn't it interesting they use terms like that, demagoguery, a threat to democracy, and then they wonder why they're often not taken seriously, but also they wonder why they're not believed, that they're not trusted. The evidence of bias in this, the idea that, they kept saying throwing out the norms. Well, isn't this throwing out the norm of innocent until proven guilty, or no? But the bias just seeps from articles like that. He cannot understand, because of his media bubble, his bubble in Washington or wherever he's based out of, none of them could ever support Trump. They would only support the Democrat candidate. So why wouldn't you think the same way? They believe in kind of anecdotal type ways that if it affects their life, it affects everybody. If it's important to people in their life, it's important to everybody. But there was a point that was made by Sadie Gurman, who says Trump is being prosecuted, but Justice Department is on trial too. And I think that is something to be aware of. There's going to be a lot of people, and rightfully so, skeptical of the Justice Department, how this is handled. We've heard from some legal experts and analysis that has said that this is really a case against the former president's First Amendment rights. That's one take on it. Bill Barr saying the opposite, that he believes it's a legitimate case. We know that he's not much of a fan of the former president any longer. We better take another short break. I know we're running quick this morning. We're going to pack in a lot, though, I guarantee you. So stay with us. Let's see if we go to break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all of you who moved your schedule around this week to catch us after the World Cup action. I can't thank you enough, but we will be back at our normal time tomorrow at 7 a.m. with our guest Richard Sturban from the Oak Ridge Boys, and also Georgia Verdier. She is the local president of the NAACP. So it's going to be an exciting show tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to it, getting back into it, and thanking M.A. Neal Financial Services for sponsoring that portion of the show. We, because the schedule was moved around this week, we did not set up interviews until Friday. That's why I have back-to-back interviews. Okay, we're now told, and I think this is kind of interesting, that we are to trust judges no matter what. Why we should trust Trump's judge in election interference case. It's interesting when we're supposed to and not supposed to trust the judge. This is not always a common opinion amongst those in the media and amongst those maybe you would deem more towards the left. But it just gives a history of Judge Chutkan and why we should trust, no matter what they claim, no matter what, should trust her and the process. Now, that'll be interesting if the decision doesn't go their way, if that trust is still there. The New York Post editorial board believes that every time Trump gets indicted, every time they throw something at him, it brings us closer to the rematch. And this is the Post. The Post is not always friendly, just so you know, because we mention them a lot, but not always friendly to Trump. But brings us closer to the rematch America really doesn't need. So they believe it just builds up Trump because people are sick of the deep state. So it builds up Trump, and then that ultimately leads to a Trump-Biden rematch when Trump wins the nomination. But what's interesting is there's a couple pieces this morning. There's a new pullout, and this shocks me, but I think it speaks volumes of how disliked Biden is, that now Vice President Harris is doing better in the polls than Biden if she would have run. Now, you've got to remember, when Kamala Harris ran for president, she never made it to the first primary state. Her campaign popularity sank. She had one good debate performance, and that was really the end of it. So she's not an overly popular figure in her own party. So that's interesting that they're starting to throw that. But the window's kind of closing here. If they are going to find someone else to run instead of Biden, they've got to do it soon. Now, there's a piece out, and I believe it was the Washington Post this morning or late yesterday, suggesting what we've been doing on the program for months now, is that Gavin Newsom is chomping at the bit to run, and he is set up, and they try to present it in a way that he's setting up for next time, not this time, but okay, that he's setting up the exact campaign that you would set up if you were going to run for president. As a matter of fact, who was it who said it? Glavin. I don't know who Glavin is. Brendan Glavin, senior data analyst at Open Secrets. For someone who has an interest in launching a presidential campaign, these are the first steps you take. I wouldn't say it's set in stone, but certainly you wouldn't do all of these things if you weren't thinking about it. That means the kind of the moves, if you will, that Governor Gavin Newsom out of California is making. It's something as simple as, about a month and a half ago, sitting down with Sean Hannity, which is kind of surprising, but trying to get that national media attention. Now, again, he keeps saying, no, that's not the case. I'm not running. Biden's my man. But, boy, it sure looks differently. Speaking of that, of things that we already discussed, but we were ahead of the curve on, it's very interesting that Joe Biden finally acknowledged his seventh granddaughter, or his seventh grandchild, and this happens to be his granddaughter. CNN's shocked by it, saying, why now? Why is he doing this? And then they try to, protect him, and why, and suggest that this was the right move. Well, what we're learning is that Hunter basically finally gave him the okay to acknowledge the child, and also because it's been so damaging to him. And I was kind of, this goes back to anecdotally, I was kind of interested in that too, how many people that normally wouldn't talk one way or the other about Biden, or maybe were actually Biden supporters, saying it's very wrong that his granddaughter had nothing to do with any of that, and she should be acknowledged and respected, and she shouldn't be punished for her parents' decisions. And I was hearing a lot of people talking about that, and then the New York Times, of all places, mentioning it and bringing it up. New York Times, not normally someone that would go after a Democrat president, and so I think there started to be some real concerns, because Joe's big thing is kind of that folksiness, that kind of caring character. At least that's what they sell us. So that all goes by the wayside if he doesn't acknowledge the seventh grandchild. So I guess he did it on a podcast that was to air this week, and the White House has gotten ahead of it. But they had to acknowledge the child to negate a Republican line of attack. That's what a source said. But before he could do so, he wanted to take one final step, getting the green light from his son, Hunter, which he received last week. Biden largely followed his son's guidance in keeping quiet as the legal case unfolded. With the dispute reaching a settlement, the president wanted to speak out, and his son agreed he should do so, in part because he told his father it would help negate a Republican line of attack. Is that the right reason? Just not being critical here. I'm asking you the question. Is that the right reason to meet your grandchild? So Republicans can't attack you on that as an issue? And again, it's about the optics of it. Yes, they don't want to be attacked by Republicans, but they know that they've been running on the fact that he's caring, he's compassionate, and that no longer flies if he doesn't acknowledge the seventh grandchild. So it's interesting to see the ebbs and flows, and I know I'm going through a lot of different topics this morning, but I wanted to play as much catch up on the news of the day, because we're just running a little bit late with Women's World Cup soccer. But again, reminder before we go to break, we will be back on tomorrow morning at our normal time at 7 a.m. All right, another short break, and then we'll be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, broadcasting live from the Hesselson's studio on this shortened edition, but very much live edition of Frankly Speaking. This is being reported throughout various media outlets that former President Obama privately warned Joe Biden to not take Trump lightly. And I think Obama sees a lot of, it's very reminiscent of 2016 with kind of the laughing off. Well, look how many indictments, look how many trials we'll have. This is a cakewalk. And I think Obama sees the red flag saying, wait a minute, don't take this lightly. And you can say Biden is, because his campaigning has been very light. Most people don't know he officially kicked off his campaign. According to sources, Obama voiced concerns about Donald Trump's political strengths, including an intensely loyal following, a Trump-friendly conservative media ecosystem, I always find that interesting, but anyway, and a polarized country, underlining his worry that Trump could be a more formidable candidate than many Democrats realize. And I always find that interesting, the conservative media ecosystem. So, one outlet. But anyway, and a polarized country. What's interesting about that line, it goes back to essentially the New York Post's point, which is, the more times Trump gets indicted, more of these attacks thrown at him, the more the likelihood that he will win the nomination. And when Obama is concerned about the polarized country leading to help Trump's campaign and his chance at the White House again, it's because people, and I quote it almost every day now, but people may not like Trump, but when they see what the DOJ is doing, they see during his presidency all the way till today how many things have been thrown at him, and they say enough with the deep state. I don't like Trump, but I hate the deep state and this government interference, believing I don't know who I should vote for. They should make sure some bureaucrat somewhere should fix it for you. And so it's interesting. I think Obama sees concern there where many others in the media and elsewhere don't, reminiscent, again, of 2016 and the same feeling. Like we had the couple of quotes recently just flashed me back where, there's no way you can win. I don't have an answer there. But I know that it seems like they're throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks to help him. Well, they think it's to hurt him, but ultimately those type of things help the former president. The indictments, his poll numbers go up. Anyway, Bill Barr, his ex-attorney general, says he believes it is a legitimate case in the Trump indictment. As a legal matter, I don't see a problem with the indictment. I think that it's not an abuse. The Department of Justice is not acting to weaponize the department by proceeding against the president for conspiracy to subvert the electoral process. They're not attacking his First Amendment rights. He can say whatever he wants. He can even lie and tell people the election was stolen when he knew better. But that does not protect you from entering into a conspiracy. All conspiracies involve speech, and all fraud involves speech. Free speech does not give you the right to fraudulent conspiracy. We know Barr has not been a big fan of the former president, but again, going to the rhetoric and trying to divide the country even more. Did you see a CNN analyst, Michael Fanone? He's a former D.C. Metropolitan Police officer, and CNN had him on the other day. He compared Trump's indictment to the killing of Osama bin Laden. He said, when I first learned about the indictment, I had a long conversation with a friend of mine, Ryan Riley, and I told him how proud I felt to be an American at that moment, much in the way I did when I learned that our military had killed Osama bin Laden. I just felt incredibly proud. So the host, Laura Coates on CNN, said, these two seem comparable to you? Why that comparison in particular? And here's what I mean by the rhetoric. The rhetoric that they don't see or understand and what it does to people that do see it. He said, I believe they are comparable. In what way? Absolutely. She said, in what way? He said, absolutely. Osama bin Laden was a terrorist who committed a horrific act against American people and against our republic. And I believe that Donald Trump is a terrorist who committed horrific acts against the American people. And they wonder why the country is divided. That's a CNN analyst, a CNN expert weighing in. They're as much divide as they can get. Okay, we got to take another short break, and then we're going to wrap things up here on Frankly Speaking, so please stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Just an interesting article that I saw before we go, because we're talking about the campaign, what the indictments do for Trump, and every time the media think they have him, it ends up boosting his donations, boosting his polling number, and the New York Post contends that that's going to lead to a Biden-Trump rematch. Maybe the exact thing that they're trying to fight against is what they'll ultimately get. But no one, listen to this, Nobody has lost a primary after holding a lead like Trump's. If you look at DeSantis in second place, he stands at more than 37 points, with Trump at 53.1. Excuse me. I worded that strange. Trump is at 53.1%, DeSantis at 15.8%. Okay. No nominee has made up that kind of gap since the 1970s, which is when the two parties moved away from deciding their presidential nominees at conventions and toward relying on the will of the primary voter. Is there the will of the primary voter? I mean, I guess if you are a Bernie Sanders supporter, would you believe that the primaries are held in a way that is the will of the primary voter? Not my party. The Republican Party didn't do that, so I can't speak for a Bernie Sanders supporter, but when they saw how the fix was in with Hillary, I always thought, boy, that must have outraged them. It'd kind of be like at the last minute if they'd say, oh yeah, Trump was winning the primary, but we're going to have it be Jeb. Trump's packing in huge crowds, but you know what? We think Jeb's the only way we can win. That's what it felt like looking as an outsider in, or as an outsider, I should say. I would have been very outraged over the Bernie Sanders. But anyway, I didn't mean to get on a tangent like that. But yes, relying on the will of the primary voters. Yeah, if you say so. Let's take another short break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. We are just about out of time. I've got to thank, we have a viewer who, as far as I know, it's a first, watching the program from a moving vehicle. I want to make it crystal clear he is not the driver of said vehicle, but watching as he's going down the road, plugging it in so that they can both, the driver and he, listen to the program. And I really appreciate that. And I will quote him as saying, let me see here, great broadcast. I plugged phone into the truck. We are both listening. We're both nodding in agreement with your show, a breath of fresh air. Well, isn't that nice? Thank you. And thank you to everybody again as we wrap up the show this morning. Thank you to everybody again who moved their schedule around. It's been exciting. Women's World Cup soccer action. I am not affected by this next week at all. We're not going to have to move, frankly speaking. I think a couple weeks down the road, there is one day. I'll keep you updated. But as of tomorrow, 7 a.m., we are back on the 7 a.m. schedule. So keep that in mind. And tomorrow's when you are definitely want to get back on schedule with at 7 o'clock, because we'll be talking with Georgia Verdier. She's the local president of the NAACP and the newest inductee into the Steuben County Hall of Fame. The Steuben County Hall of Fame, I'm a big supporter of the work that they do there. So I'm glad that we could talk to the newest inductee, Georgia Verdier. After Georgia, we're going to be talking with Richard Sturban. Richard Sturban is an Oak Ridge boy. You know the Oak Ridge Boys, of course. Elvira being their biggest hit. They sold over 41 million records, so I'm guessing many of you out there at least bought one of them. You can find out more at oakridgeboys.com. They have a new album out called Front Porch Singing. It's produced by David Cobb, and it's really interesting. He'll tell us about it, but it was recorded during COVID, so you remember the time of what it felt like at that time. So we'll talk about that with him. They're playing at the Point of the Bluff Vineyards in Hammondsport this Saturday. Not too late to get tickets. I will say I've seen them in concert before, and it's an amazing show. So I would highly recommend it if you are an Oak Ridge Boys fan or on the fence. Do not miss out on that. As always, you can contact me before we go to break. I'll put that information up, and when I say break, end of the program. Again, thank you to everybody who joined us this morning and all week who have moved the schedule around. We will be back again. I just want to drive this point home. 7 a.m. tomorrow with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. One of the stories I did not have a chance to get to. If you get an opportunity, Betsy McKay and New York Post wrote a great piece called Americans Will Go Broke If Zero Carbon Politicians Get Their Way. And also, I don't really have time. I don't even think I would have dove too deep into this anyway, even if I did have the time. But how do I do that is the title of the article. The new hires of 2023 are unprepared for work. So when you hear some politicians say, no, the COVID lockdowns weren't that detrimental to kids, you know, the schools had to do what they had to do. Remote learning during the pandemic left students short of basic skills. Now companies are trying to teach them on the job, the basic skills. All right, we are out of time. Thank you to everybody who joined us. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 7 with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Have a great day.